I'm going to mute myself.
We're at 29.
That's great. I'm surprised. I'm really, this is,
I'm not. I'm connected to Brian Sullivan on CNTV, and I can't tell you that he's listening in, but I did send this to him and told him you'd be a good person to interview if he wanted to do that too.
oh, wow. Pressure's on.
Okay, hi everyone. I want to welcome you to the 16th talk from the P.A.S.S series, which stands for Petrolern at-Home Seminar Series. I'm Alan Cohen. I'm the executive advisor, and I suppose I'm now the director of business development for Petrolern LLC, and I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Susan Nash. For those of you who don't know us, Petrolern works on R&D and consulting in the oil and gas, carbon storage, and geothermal industries, and we also provide training. And it's a very trying time now that we're going through COVID, but I hope we'll all pass this time safely and in good health and really enjoy the speaker today. We have finalized and announced on LinkedIn the June schedule with 9 exciting talks, and we're working on our July schedule now. So if you're interested in giving a talk, please contact me or email us at info@petrolern.com. That's PETROLERN.com. Our next seminar is on June the 5th by Professor Tim Carr from West Virginia University, entitled Using Cost-Effective Logging While Drilling to Design Completion Activities Underway During MCL2, which is a national lab, field lab in the Marcellus. Before introducing Dr. Nash, could you please mute your microphones and turn off your cameras? If you have any questions, hit the little raise your hand button, and Hamid, who is moderating this, will unmute you and you'll be able to ask your questions. Susan has encouraged us to not wait until the end, but when you see something that intrigues you, raise your hand and jump in. By the way, if you're not able to stay for the whole talk, it lasts basically an hour with Q&A, or if some of your colleagues have missed this, we are recording this presentation, and this talk and the first 15 talks are all available on our website at www.petrolern.com. So I've known Susan for a few years, and in my vernacular, I think Susan is a real Renaissance person, because she really does everything. She's a real go-getter, and she really helps so many people, and is a great spokesman for the AAPG, specifically and for our industry in general. So her journey began as a petroleum geologist. She holds a Bachelor of Science from the University of Oklahoma, where she worked for large operators and then on her own, involved in drilling and operating wells in Texas, Oklahoma, and other parts of America. During the dark times in business, Susan stayed active as a petroleum geologist, but also diversified into developmental economics and discourse analysis, where she earned master's and PhD degrees from the University of Oklahoma and delivered training programs for USAID, the World Bank, and entities in Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Paraguay, Kenya, Mozambique, and other countries. Always fascinated by technology, in the late 1990s, Dr. Nash diversified into online education, instructional design, and business development, which provided a perfect framework for training, education, and technology transfer, both for universities and later for the AAPG and other professional associations. Through it all, Susan has stayed active as a geologist and as a promoter of innovation, technology, and the humanities to open doors for others. Her talk is entitled Crossover Skills to Rebuild and Reconfigure Our Pandemic-Ripped World, Opportunities for Geoscientists. So thank you so much, Susan, for agreeing to do this, and it's all yours.
Oh, thank you. So I'm hoping you can hear me, and I'll get close to the mic. And thank you, Alan. Alan, it's been really great to know you over the years as well. I've been really impressed with everything that you've done with your background in geomechanics, and then also all the work that you did for the Department of Energy, and it's just really impressive. So it's been really great to know you, and I want to thank Hamed too. I've known Hamed for a long time too, starting out with AEPG, the geomechanics conferences back. I think the first one was maybe Baltimore. It was like a long time ago, but it was really great. The early days of the Marcellus. But anyway, I want to thank you and also and just explain a little bit about that like kind of lengthy bio because I wanted to give everybody an idea that it is possible to transition and do different things. The thing to do is start by knowing yourself. But I just wanted to say that basically, here's the abstract for the meeting or this talk, but I'm not going to be very strict or rigid with it. I really want to share my experiences, insights, but also talk to you about a lot of things that I'm seeing right now, primarily through the initiatives that I've been involved with the last several years, also the experience of economic development, but primarily through a set of workshops that I've been putting together in conjunction with something that's called UPitch, which is kind of a science and technology showcase. We're looking at trying to identify where the investment will be in the next 18 to 24 months and what that means to you. So there are a lot of unknowns. It's a fluid world, but there are things that we do know. We do know that in the next 18 to 24 months, or even more, we know that there's not going to be a lot of investment in drilling. And we also know that there are going to continue to be shrinkages in the number of people that are directly employed by operators and also service companies. And we also know that there are going to be a number of bankruptcies. So what that means is that a lot of people will do well if they can maintain a pivoted stance. They can change their career and kind of do something at the same time. So, for example, if that means staying in the business, you may find yourself helping across the board in some other aspect of the business, maybe in midstream or in business development, or more likely in remote operations. We'll go into that a little bit more. But it also means that this is an opportunity for you to branch out and do something completely different. And so let's say that you've thought, well, I've always liked the idea of getting involved in more medical types of things, or in areas of say events or even manufacturing. There are going to be opportunities, although it may seem like there's not right now because of the high unemployment rate. Where we know the investment will be in stages. So the structure of demand for all stages is changing due to the pandemic, but where that demand is structured basically correlates with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So you think about it, remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like it starts at like basic food, shelter, energy, just, survival. Then it goes up and up and up until you get to like affiliation, then you get to, at the top is like self-actualization. Well, surprisingly enough, even with all the difficulties in the industry the last couple of years, a lot of people have gotten to the point of almost to self-actualization. Well, with the double black swan of negative $37 per barrel and COVID-19, we just boom, back down to like survival. And so suddenly things like masks became important. My N95 mask for the office I'm in, even though I'm alone in this entire floor, and things like basic water, food, and people started prepping. Things like that became extremely important. And so where did the demands occur, where could you have made money besides hoarding and selling masks and protective equipment, but obviously in like things like transportation. So the companies that were able to pivot, a lot of companies were those that were involved in equipment transport, water hauling, etc. Well, they made the pivot and changed to transporting something else. So the thing to do is look at your skills and say, okay, what and your capabilities, where is the demand shifting? Now we enter another phase here in Oklahoma. We're in phase 3 of reopening the Governor Stitt's plan. And that means that we have, I think around 150 people hospitalized with COVID-19, very few new cases, not many deaths, knock on wood. and so we're able to open up in limited ways. So I'm at the office for a budget meeting. We're doing, obviously everything's been super cleaned, et cetera. What are the things that are necessary to reopen? So again, think about the pandemic knowns as well as the unknowns. We don't know how long it will last, but we know in order to get back to work, things have to be, they have to be safe. So what does that mean? So again, looking at all that, any person or individual who can help provide those necessary elements to help a restaurant open, help an organization have a clean, safe environment, electrostatic cleaners, HEPA filters, all sorts of things. Those are all, they suddenly become really important. So some people that in the oil industry have gotten laid off have actually transitioned into providing some of those needs. And they're doing that while staying is busy as a geologist or engineer, et cetera. So let's think of another thing. So we also know that we've had the pressures on, we'll have supply disruptions in supply chain. We'll talk about this a little bit more in depth, but every time that something is broken, that actually represents an opportunity. And you might say, well, I don't know. I don't make, I don't make spare parts for cars, or I don't have a small factory. But there's all kinds of support for new kinds of smart systems and smart operations. So it really makes a big difference if you know how to exactly analyze what skills are needed. And you might say, well, I like to do stuff in the field. Okay, good. But that doesn't mean that you don't have other skills. So let's think about what we'll have. We know that some of the pandemic unknowns, changing the structure of supply for energy inputs, structure of demand, physically and logistically, we have a lot of restrictions. But then another thing that's really, really critical is to keep in mind that in all of this, there are going to be unknown operational challenges, and there are pivots toward innovation. So your ability to envision cause and effect and in scenarios is more important than ever. So like I've been in a budget meeting this morning, I've mentioned that earlier. What were we talking about? We're talking about potential scenarios, part of risk assessment, but it's also a chance to imagine, and not just an apocalyptic, slouching toward apocalypse type of horrific zombie scape, which is like, I have to say that was my first couple of months of this, that like dominated my thoughts. But thankfully, come out of it thinking, okay, there are going to be changes, but there are also positive things. And one can say that about social disruption as well. Some of the unknowns, a lot of social inequality comes out, and finally people will do something about it and and can be constructive. And out of pain comes the possibility of actually changing attitudes and changing opportunities. So it's an opportunity for all of us to be a positive change agent. I'm just going to start jumping into these crossover skills. So you probably are guessing, what's the first crossover skill that makes sense? Obviously, it's probably in analytics. For you to be able to move within the industry, you really need to know as much as you can about analytics, how to use them and work with teams. You don't have to be the person doing the coding. And I think that's one of the things that people are fearful. Oh my goodness, am I going to have to spend all day coding in Python? Well, if you want to, you can, but you know that the key is to know what's out there. So let's just start with data management. Data management is incredibly important in the sense of understanding the different cloud-based solutions. So whether it be Amazon Web Services or Google or Microsoft or some of the Azure, some of the others, then think about exactly what the cloud-based solutions are. You may be in an organization that's creating a cloud-based solution. More likely than not, it'll be in one that's using one. So depending on the types of ways that you need to manage the information, you can do research on different kinds of cloud-based solutions and new environments and platforms, and especially ones that allow collaborative activities and collaboration. Because in this crossover skill, especially since it will be working from home and just occasionally from the office, it's really important to be able to have access to the collaborative environments. And let's think about also, if we talk about machine learning, what are the kinds of things, the algorithms and things that you'll do with machine learning? I mean, just in simple terms, pattern recognition and being able to classify and do things more quickly depends on what you want to do. So think about if it's oil and gas, or if it's crossover to any kind of behavior or pattern of anything. Just basically learn about machine learning, and then also be able to determine things like modeling, random forests, building in uncertainty. And then in deep learning, take it a step further and work with the deep learning platforms, or work with a team where you have models that can actually predict behaviors. So in the oil and gas industry, it's important to understand, like, for example, geology or reservoir, to be able to predict flow and flow under different environments and regimes and different pressures, et cetera. So you can use that. And then it's in automation and smart operations, predict things like equipment failure rates and when and how things will begin to fail, or maintenance, et cetera. So are there any questions at this point? Anybody want to share their experiences? I have a question for the audience. So as you look around and you start to think about, sorry, I drink water. As you start to think about, I don't know why I'm so hoarse suddenly. Anyway, I haven't talked this long in a long time. As you start to think about your own interests, how do you start? Like, how do you get started? Has anybody just pivoted completely? And if you have, how did you get started? I guess the answer is no one.
Susan, this is Hamid. Maybe I can start on this and
Okay.
encourage people to join the discussion. We have a lot of actually shy people within our audiences, apparently. So personally, if I want to start something different from what I've been doing before, I think it's very critical, first of all, to know if we really have any passion on that or not.
Right.
You know, because now forcing ourselves to do something because industry needs that, or it opens opportunities for us, it is a temporary attempt, and later on you will find out that you are not enjoying it. And I would say 99% you won't be successful in it. So I would
I
list,
totally agree with that.
yeah. So I list the things that I really like doing them, and then see which one has more quick potential, basically, to bring me back to a good market, to basically be able to make money out of it. And then I will start reading and learning about it, and then take it from there. That would be my first step.
That's a really good approach. And one thing that I did when the industry collapsed, when I was working, had a company, worked with my dad actually, and I had been I had been worked at Diamond Shamrock as a petroleum geologist, but then left and did my own thing. It's like there are certain aspects I liked of the job I was doing in the oil and gas, but in petroleum geology. And there are certain other aspects I didn't like as much. And I really did like the creativity of mapping. And I also liked sharing the ideas and the vision and going out and marketing them. Well, it wasn't a very good time to market my prospects, and I remember I did it first. I bought them in leases, and I would go out and sell them, you know, have the prospect go out and sell leases and keep an overriding royalty interest. And actually those overrides lasted a long time. They got small, but the thing, I enjoyed that. Now, I took on too much risk because I assumed that I'd be able to buy or sell leases, all the leases, the 3-year leases that I purchased. And well, that didn't really happen. And so the leases expired, and that was a painful lesson. But there was also an opportunity to diversify. And I thought, what do I really like? I really liked the idea of marketing. I also liked the business side of things. And I also liked, I really enjoyed kind of looking within and saying, okay, how does this well transform the community? What is it doing? Because I go into rural Oklahoma and Texas, I see things that fascinated me. And I always liked Spanish, so I'd always been obsessed with Spanish. And so, and I went to Bolivia when I was visited a friend, I was 18. That was a formative time. And so I continued to study and continued to learn about the cultures. And I became very interested in developmental economics. So I took the finance and accounting, all those courses, but I also took focus on developmental economics with an end to resources and resource assessment, and looking not just at energy, but also in terms of minerals. But then I also got involved with whatever it took. I represented different companies, but I went back to school, and then I ended up working for Kerr-McGee as an international operations analyst in titanium dioxide. So we had a synthetic rutile plant, and also rutile and in Australia. So what we did is we created in the company, we had a pigment plant. So the rutile was feedstock for the titanium dioxide pigment. And so I also worked with the research lab a lot to figure out, okay, which grade was ideal for different paints, plastics, food grade, et cetera, even cosmetics. That was fun. And so I would work closely with them, and then I would work closely with marketing and with the customers. And so I developed a schedule for the plants. Everything I could go in sequence for the production of the different pigments. So I was able to bring together a lot of my own experience and interests, but then also in that brought business, also production, project management, planning, and it was just incredibly interesting. Now, in today's world, I wouldn't be needed. We'd probably have, I mean, I used Excel spreadsheets and did all this, and created pivot tables and all that stuff, so that I could do the simulations and also the scheduling and plan and have the quantities, etc. But in reality today, I mean, you could essentially make this completely automated and create a smart manufacturing system. And would you need a person in there? Yeah, you would. You still would, because you'd need to interface with the clients and also work with them to develop new products. So one of the things that I really enjoyed doing was working with the different paint manufacturers, Benjamin Moore, et cetera, and also plastics, especially with the blow molded plastics and extrusion and low density polyethylene and polypropylene. It was like so interesting to see what they could make, but then the right kind of pigment, the grade was 832, I remember that, for plastics. But working with them to see, and with the research group, to have a teamwork, collaborative attitude about developing products. And to me, that's the key mindset. And so if I'm going to do analytics, it isn't just analytics for analytics' sake. It's analytics to get from point A to B. Want to build a new product, want to modify a product, want to work with the client, and then more than anything, actually help them and work with them on looking at the market. Because I think one of the key things that the big mistakes and lessons learned is that I've had over the years is that it doesn't work to just have a build it and they will come model. It's like, oh, well, this is really cool, it's nice. Well, if there's no utility for it, forget it. I mean, I'm trying to think of like one thing that people developed. Remember the gold, well, I don't know if you remember this, but glow in the dark goldfish. Like, okay, yeah, you can make them. You can make glow in the dark goldfish. How many people want one? And ethical concerns aside, is that like even an ethical thing to have? Let's think about it. The analytics that you create and deal with also need to extend into understanding your environment, the context. So more than anything, in a pivotal skill is to be able to understand the market and be flexible. So right now, like let's say that you're thinking, I'm going to pivot and I'm going to make a smart factory. I'm going to make a lot of masks. And I've noticed almost every place I've ordered online, like, hey, buy our masks. We have masks. Well, I hope that they're not planning to make masks forever, and that they're able to, and they're not investing too much capital in that, but knowing exactly when your payout is, how long you need to get to get your ideal ROI, and to understand exactly what the structure of your demand is going to be, and plan for it to be brief, as well as maybe like, seep surge, whatever. Because one of the things that we do know in this pandemic world, and with social media, you have a lot of Me Too's and copycats. And so once one person has the idea, it's definitely becomes either a meme or goes viral, or everybody will be doing pretty much the same thing. So So one of the things to keep in mind in this time is that your competition is going to surge quickly, which is the reason why you need to be extremely flexible and creative and have at least 2 or 3 little contingency plans. But more than anything, understand what your core interests are and build on those, because as you do that and you are able to pivot and respond to the changing needs, then you won't be just stuck. And you also won't have that, like, burning anger of like, I pivoted to this because it was supposed to pay off and it didn't. I mean, it's just, Hamid was right. It's like a big mistake just to go and chase the what seems to be today's great need or great opportunity.
Excuse me, Susan, we have a few people wanted to actually
Good.
willing to share their stories. So I would like to start with Nancy. Nancy, would you please?
Hello, everybody. My name is Nancy McMillan. I'm an academic geologist at New Mexico State University, and I grew up as your traditional igneous petrologist, and then ran into an interesting student and a technology called LIBS, which is laser-induced breakdown spectroscopy. It's what NASA uses on Mars to analyze rocks, and it captivated me. It turns out this technique is very rapid, and so you can get a lot of information in a short time. So we've been exploring it to look at provenance of materials. Everything, we're very interested in petroleum products, actually. Can we tell what unit they're from or what country they're from?
Wow.
Yeah, conflict minerals, we have published several things.
Wow, that's like forensics.
It is forensics, and we're pushing actually to get it into Bitcoin, because the information
cool.
in Bitcoin is like a picture of the label, which is not that secure, but a lib spectrum you can't fake. But anyways, it was a big transformation. I had to change how I thought about geochemistry, but also I had to learn so much physics and chemistry that I didn't know.
That's
and
cool.
So that was the big challenge, and I still feel like there's holes in my background, but I just keep marching forward. So the previous talker talked about passion, and I think that I have found a passion for this, and that's what's carried me past all of the hurdles and the people who say that's not how we do it, and it's pushed me through all of that.
That's great.
Yeah, really fun. So thanks for the opportunity to say something.
No, this is good.
Thank you, Nancy. We have Jeremy also interested in sharing his view. Jeremy, please go ahead.
Hi, thanks a lot. I'm Jerry Boak, and hi.
Oh, hi, Jerry. Hi.
Since we've been in touch. And I just wanted to say, my career started out not unlike Nancy, and I think we've crossed paths at some time in the past, as a metamorphic petrologist working on the oldest rocks on the planet at East or West Greenland. They're no longer the oldest, but they're close to it. And when I finished that, the job that I got was with ARCO in Alaska, which looked like a pretty good deal for a geologist, a field-oriented geologist. And it was exciting. It was interesting, but I had to sort of learn to ignore most of the old rocks I was familiar with. But I worked there, and then, of course, because it was the 1980s and there was a lot of change in the oil and gas industry there, I bounced from Alaska down to Denver and ultimately to Bakersfield with ARCO. Did a little bit of consulting for them at one point in my career because I was doing a career change, but in essence stayed in petroleum geology for about 6 years. At the end of that time, I started working for the Yucca Mountain Project, dealing with long-term disposal of spent fuel and nuclear waste. And at the end of that time, I shifted over and went to Los Alamos, where I worked on environmental restoration, on pollution prevention, on environmental technology development, and on disposal of nuclear materials, not necessarily nuclear waste, a whole bunch of interesting things. And every step of the way, as far as I can tell, there were interesting opportunities to apply concepts I learned even in metamorphic petrology, the fundamental geochemistry, the physics that I had learned to do that work. Were remarkably applicable in odd corners I even took some petroleum scientists by surprise because they were worried about magnesium chloride in their waste materials and some of their residue materials. And they showed this diagram of a process that used magnesium chloride in it. And I looked at it, and it was a liquidus diagram. Nancy will be familiar with these, for sodium, potassium, and magnesium chloride. And I said, well, you're not going to have any magnesium chloride because there are intermediate compounds that are going to be the most stable ones as you crystallize your melt. And I hadn't even thought of that. Always surprising things turned up. And, following Los Alamos, I went to work at the Colorado School of Mines, working on the true oil shales, the solid materials that have oil potentially producible from them. And then ended up my career as the state geologist of Oklahoma.
That was great.
Basically, there's always interesting opportunities out there. And if you're excited about geology, or even some of the other fields that, lead you far astray from it, as I certainly was at some points, there's lots of interesting things to do out there that require kind of, and I use the term in its real sense, that require analytical capability, an analytical mind. I'm always worried when I see adjectives turned into nouns, so that analytics is just a vagifier for a whole bunch of things that nobody's ever defined the limits on or given a proper definition for. But I'm fascinated and interested in working with Petrolern, just because I'm probably not going to have the energy and time to become a machine learning myself. So it'd be fun to work with some people who've done a lot of those things.
Well, and I think that, to the point, like your skills for example, finding adequate places to dispose of nuclear or hazardous waste. Well, one thing too, like thinking of what some of the things that you did with induced seismicity when you were in
True.
Oklahoma. I've noticed that there are people now working with geologists. They are construction engineers and structural engineers and civil engineers that do not have a very good understanding of why and how the earth moves, not just in terms of seismic or geophysics, but also just the nature of rocks. And so that to me has been, I like it. I like what you're saying. And one of the things too, I think, as a geologist, I had to learn project management pretty quickly, but this is from operations in geology, and also for just doing mapping, because it's a project, and you can't just like sit around and just work on a map forever and like we can. I have some areas, but there has to be like an end point, and then that's one thing about industry is it gives you a chance to work with people in a team, and you have to work in a team. So I did do leasing for a while, but it was really better to have. It was really much better to have a professional land person do it, because I was just like way too emotionally attached and believed in it too much. I was a horrible negotiator. And so, because I was too close to it, or same with, I'm not an engineer, and I learned a lot but it's very important to work with those different team members. And then, so let's say though that there's, in the next 18 to 24 months, you just have no opportunities whatsoever in the oil industry. What kind of skills do you have? So in terms of project management, there's supply chain. So think about all the areas now that are broken, supply chains are broken. There is a lot of interest and a lot of money sitting on the side waiting to invest in rebuilding manufacturing in the US. But it's not massive manufacturing on the scale you'd see in China, but smart manufacturing that's pivotable and uses things like 3D printing, not just the 3D printing that you would have in your garage and have for making fun things, but also for things like there's metal 3D printing, ceramics 3D printing. So working with people and a team to develop that ability to fabricate where there are key needs and necessities. So, for example, there might be some areas in midstream where you have gas gathering systems, et cetera, that some of the parts may be coming from China, or there's just one supply, one area. So just being able to work with that and have it build in redundancy and robustness into the supply chain is a huge opportunity. And also just even things like repurposing, warehouse capabilities, smart warehousing, smart using robotics where possible. And then just a crossover skill that if you don't have it now, you will have it soon, which is using a lot of the efficiency and productivity apps like Trello, or even just simply using Teams and being able to manage a good virtual meeting. So those are just core abilities that you may be doing something outside what you thought you'd be doing, but if you have the skills to bring it together, you can coordinate those. And then I've seen a lot of engineers and geologists move into business development, which I would say that if I classify myself, I've been doing a lot of that, even though it's been, you know, in all sorts of crazy things. It's been fun. But to do that, you really do need to go ahead and take some economics courses and some strategic planning, do some. I would also recommend just be your own intern or volunteer to work with somebody and like say, okay, you know, let me like help or whatever. But just as an intern, even though it maybe is not an official, but getting involved in different projects. Risk assessment is really critical, and just being able to develop basic heat maps to give you a sense of strategic planning is incredibly important. Assessing the changing world, identifying emerging needs, identifying shifting needs, and then converging perfect storms. So like if you have a situation where you have social unrest along with, say, infections of COVID-19, what does that mean to operations? Can you help plan? Can you develop business in spite or because of, due to that? I mean, think of the big picture and helping people. And let's say that you really like the outdoors, you like field work, so that say you're really interested in events planning. There's not a lot of events right now that involve going outdoors, but there can be. And even like if you've in the past done things like organized field trips or done things like that, think about ways to be able to make those things happen and do them in a safe way. And so that gets to my kind of strategy of building your own brand. And you might say, well, I don't know what my brand would be and I feel shy, I don't really want to do that. Well, you may not think of yourself as building your brand, but you're building your brand every day. And what is that brand? Well, before you can actually think about the brand, think about your own personal mission and your own personal vision statement. Develop a vision for where you'd like to be from now and attach to it at least 2 or 3 core competencies. And then list the kinds of industries that could be applicable to. Even if you don't actually do them, be able to explain them. And then match emerging industry or society needs. So a lot of people are talking about pivoting to geothermal. And I personally think that that's an honorable and wonderful thing. I don't know how many geothermal experts one would need in the world. But to be able to understand what that means and be able to develop solutions with low enthalpy, et cetera, is so even with different, it doesn't have to be like Iceland where you're injecting water onto the mantle. It could be an old abandoned well, just that there's a geothermal gradient difference. The thing is, okay, why would you know this, need to know this? And where would it matter? You could look at, well, some of the best geothermal resources are potentially in the Yellowstone super caldera. This is great, but show me the population. And so unfortunately, a lot of solutions aren't close to population centers, or at this point, there's not really an adequate way to store the energy, but there is energy need. And when we talk about the electrification and decarbonization of the US, a lot of that's predicated on being able to transport electricity from point A to B. Well, chances are, as we recover from what we're going through, there's not going to be a lot of investment for the high transmission lines, power transmission lines, but there's still going to be a lot of need for additional electricity. And that will continue to grow as we become more dependent on smart systems. And so what am I getting at? Local supply of electricity. So being able to map out and work with people who are involved in, say, a local geothermal supply for a solution. And on what level? Is it for residences? Is it for an entire community? Is it for a part of a community? On what level are you going to be doing that? If you want to be involved in solar or wind or like even miniature hydropower and stream generated, all those things do have to do with energy and geothermal. Now, the geothermal obviously has a lot more to do with geology itself than, say, solar, but you might be able to have some transitional skills that apply. So as you build your brand, one of the ways to do so and to open doors is to share your knowledge and create some sort of micro learning on-demand videos. I've created like hundreds of poorly produced, spontaneously produced videos that I used in conjunction with e-learning. And they were just like, I tried to keep them under 2 minutes. And I've kind of lost that skill. So I wanted to start building that skill again. But have a message that's in either small snippets, or if you're going to develop a concept, keep it under 15 minutes, but do some micro learning and get familiar with just helpful applications. I mean, use Screencast-O-Matic, it's free. For the version that doesn't have the Screencast-O-Matic watermark is only like, I mean, it's cheap, it's like $50 for a year. And also start doing a podcast, develop a series, and I mean, it was amazingly helpful for me. This is several years ago. I did quite a few in terms of e-learning. And then I got really bored with e-learning because it seemed so factory. But then with the pandemic, e-learning has suddenly become extremely interesting again because it's changed with the world's changing. And so that skill and background suddenly became useful again. And so as you build your brand, think about what you'd like to share, what other people would find useful, and do it. And then I just finally want to talk a little bit about, you might see a lot of notices on LinkedIn, like, oh, right now, live, storytelling, telling your story. And then you hear a lot of people talk about how they've turned into a storyteller, or they're a technical storyteller. Okay, as a person who has been totally indoctrinated into the rhetoric and you know, one of my areas in my general exam had to do with the theories of discourse from the pre-Socratics and poetics, generating meaning, discursive meaning from the pre-Socratics through the 20th century. I find a lot of that really, really shallow, and yet there's such a huge demand for it. So I had to like back away from my snobbishness, and it's like, oh, what are they talking about? They know nothing about this stuff. Like, and then listen to it with an open mind and say, okay, why is there a need for it? And why are people suddenly interested in it? And what's being repurposed here? I mean, the message, obviously, and potentially the problem is that things are very technical and people can't actually articulate what the thing is doing, or what's happening or why. And it just gets, the message gets lost in too many details. So I always think about that. And in terms of rhetoric, think about Aristotle and the key things about what do you really want to do? You want to persuade somebody to take action. And how are you doing it? So there's pathos, the emotions, and then there's logos, through logic, and there's ethos, through your credibility. And if you notice, a lot of people just focus on one or the other, and they don't do the others. So a lot of, like, for example, fake news or the news that gets your attention is it has an extreme emphasis on pathos. Now, I did a lot of study on the apocalyptic narrative, which turns out to be the gift that keeps on giving. Did my dissertation on how the apocalyptic narrative is used by mad messiah types, doomsday cults to influence people. And I used it in cultural, literary, and film texts. And it was essentially a dissertation about bad leadership. And I also thought, if I wanted to start a doomsday cult, I know exactly how to do so. Now, I have not done so. And I chose not to because I think it would be unethical, needless to say. But I also thought that understanding and being able to deconstruct what's really going on in the message is really important. And yes, you know, the elements are, there's an end of the world, things are doom and gloom, only the true believers believe that one person will survive, and there will be new heaven and new earth. And that's sort of a promise to the true believers. But to manipulate people, you first need to starve them, deprive them of sleep, all these other things. Knowing that, and that those people essentially have a kind of extended Stockholm syndrome, is useful in understanding how to work with people in a traumatized world. So if we realize that we've all more or less been subject to doomsday narratives and apocalyptic narratives, and that we're also vulnerable to believing the promises of a person who promises to keep us safe, again, going back to gone back to our basic needs, it helps us maybe get over some of the potential cognitive bias that might blind us. And so one of the things that's helpful in this is that, you know, deconstruct your story, get an objective outside third person, but also understand how your mind works. Your mind works through creating patterns and through that narrative where you actually expect a certain outcome, and which is it's kind cognitive bias, but then understand too that your rational mind is going to go on hold if your limbic system is being triggered, your reptilian brain. So it's one of the key elements in the apocalyptic narrative and making people vulnerable is to keep them as traumatized as possible. So then they react completely with their emotional survival side, and they do not think through anything. And so as you're thinking through making a decision and your skills, step back a minute and make a true assessment, and then identify and make a thought log and identify where you're falling into different kinds of cognitive bias. And so one of the best books that I've read, changed my life actually, was David Burns' The Feeling Good book. And the Feeling Good handbook is free online now in a PDF. But it shows you how to keep a log, and then it helps you identify your kinds of cognitive bias. Is it fortune telling? Is it predicting doom and gloom? Are you exaggerating certain elements? Are you looking for confirmation bias? All those things. Anyway, I can go on and on. I don't mean to just drone on, but we have a few minutes, and I'd like to see if there are any questions. I put everybody to sleep.
Alan, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. I think most of the questions that were typed in have been answered already. I'm not sure if there's some new ones.
Okay. Well, I hope that this has been helpful in terms of building your own prescription and your own formula for yourself, and stepping back and making an assessment of your interests. And at the same time, when you start to make your decisions, analyze yourself and the kinds of emotional triggers that are being, that you're triggering in yourself through your own thoughts. And that will tell you a lot about your interests and your likes and dislikes, but it'll also tell you a lot about your relationships too, and which people you can work with and which people, well, may not be all that helpful.
So Susan, there is one question that just popped up. You made reference to a book or a reference that changed your life. Could you repeat that again? Some people want to know what that was.
Okay, the author is David Burns, B-U-R-N-S. And the book is the Feeling Good book. And also there's a Feeling Good handbook. Yeah, it's a workbook. It was good. And then I also would like to recommend Bruno Latour, L-A-T-O-U-R. And just basically talking about the scientific or the social construction of reality and social construction of scientific knowledge, and understanding that and also recommends Thomas Kuhn's The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, because we are held back by our systemic thinking. And I mean, I was completely brainwashed by the academy. And so I can't say that, and I'm not brainwashed, programmed, and I embrace it. I mean, I agree with a lot of the things. At the same time, for paradigms to actually be changed, we have to be able to listen to other opposing viewpoints, and being willing to think about things, even if they go against the conventional wisdom. I'm thinking of geology. I can imagine myogeosynclines, and what was the before, what was it before plate tectonics, that there was a theory of the earth that was like, Oh, and anyway, it had to do with like differential sinking of the crust instead of plate tectonics. And Tanya Ottwater's work kind of helped bring back the long discredited ideas of is it Alfred Wegener?
Mm-hmm.
Susan, this is Hamid again. I have a quick question for you. It has, I mean, according to my experience, it has been always this actually debate that people who are more like generalists and they try to learn things from different disciplines and then fit their self to the job opportunities or you know, any other opportunities based on I mean these many skills that they have, not in a high level but in a medium or low level, versus the people who are really specialized in a specific discipline. I mean, which one do you recommend? Which of these people are more successful in keeping their jobs or, you know, staying in the business in such a, you know, crazy condition that we are in right now?
Well, it depends on how specialized your knowledge is and how useful and needed it is. So say, for example, you have very specialized knowledge about certain geomechanics, for example, that are used in modeling rock properties. I mean, that can be used. Okay, let's say it's only for one formation or one. I mean, I don't know how transferable that is, but if you can use that really specialized knowledge and use it in a number of different places, I think that's very, very good. But if it depends on what your knowledge is, like I have a lot of specialized knowledge about, you know, rhetoric or and also in avant-garde poetics. Well, guess what? I'm not using that to specifically in my career. However, and I love it, but I've just used it in my own, for my own, but I've used it in a general sense to build my creativity and think about the study of literature, economics, geology as a discoursive explanation. So be able to create categories and broaden the categories based on your specialized knowledge. So I think the first thing to do is if you have really, really specialist knowledge, specialized, then try to think of how many places you can apply that. And so stay with that knowledge, but just broaden it out for different locations. And then, like I'm thinking of, like, for example, Henry Posmentier, and he does a lot of things with geomorphology in ancient geomorphology and using it in deep water sediments and stuff. Well, maybe he got that knowledge in one specific area, but then applying it across the world, but applying it for different reasons. That can be your special edge. I don't know if that answered the question.
Sure, it did.
I think combination.
Thank you for that. Alan, do you want to close the session?
Yeah, this is fascinating to me. So Susan didn't just say, besides working in oil and gas, you can also work in geothermal, carbon storage, mining, environmental, and so on. So it was broader than that. It gave me personally some things to think about. I do want to thank you again for your time. We had well over 40 participants, so I want to thank those people. The next talk is on June the 5th. It's by Professor Tim Carr from University of West Virginia on cost-effective logging while drilling to design completions at the MSEAL. That's the Marcellus, one of the Marcellus field labs that the U.S. government is cost shared. So thank you again for your time and attention. We hope we see you at another one in these series, and keep safe and keep working on your personal brands. Thanks very much, Susan.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you very much.